explore and get to know myself so that I can know when I need to pursue and work towards change and when I just need to accept what is, right? And I don't know about you, but if that doesn't woo, take some stress off of us, I don't know what will. I'm big on affirmations. I'm big on quotes when I'm having a stressful time. So I will encourage you kind of after you listen to this presentation today that when you're struggling with something, you're struggling with change, you're struggling with how to manage your stress, you will find lots of inspiration. Just Google inspirational quotes. And you can be dealing with grief, you can be dealing with financial issues, inspirational quotes about relationships. Trust me, you can find them very, very easily. Okay. But yeah, that's one of my favorites, guys. So self-awareness. Basically, I'm sure everybody may be familiar with a selfie. If you don't have social media, such as Facebook or Instagram, you may get pictures sent to you in your phone from family and friends of selfies, right? When they are experiencing something exciting and they want to share it with you, or maybe they got the hair done or they have a new outfit, they take a selfie of themselves, right? So that they can capture that moment, capture that image of themselves. Well, so I wanted to kind of pair self-awareness with that, is you kind of taking a selfie of yourself so that you can really kind of say, okay, look, this is me. This is who I am. This is what I look like. So a definition would be conscious knowledge of one's own character, feelings, motives, and desires. And I think sometimes we miss how important it is to be self-aware of your feelings, how to be self-aware of your belief system. And even in this climate of social or civil unrest, this is a huge one. I think a lot of people are discovering things about themselves that perhaps without some of the events that have played out, you probably would not have explored those things about yourself, right? So my recommendation as a mental health professional, self-awareness is something that you should never stop doing. This should be an ongoing process for you. Because guess what? We change. We never stay the same because of all of the experiences that we encounter in life. Those things that are expected, those things that are unexpected. And so it's always good to do an inventory of who we are, particularly when we are experiencing transitions within our life. And let's use perhaps becoming a caregiver. You went from being a son, a daughter, a wife, a cousin, aunt, uncle, and all of a sudden now I'm also a caregiver. It's time to do an inventory of yourself, to be aware of how am I responding to this change and this transition, okay? So what are some ways that you can explore that on your own? Personality test. Now, I personally recommend, if you don't already have a mental health professional that you work with, or a psychologist that you can link up with. Yes, there are personality tests online, some of which are just fun. They're just fun tests to do. But I would certainly reach out to a local resource of a mental health professional that could give you a valid personality test so that you can learn, okay, this is what my personality says about me and how I behave and my attitude. Also explore your skill set. What are you good at? What are your strengths? What are your weaknesses? Because knowing what your skill set is, you learn what your limitations are. And I will speak for myself when I say there are times that I want to be able to do something to help someone because my heart is to help them, but I have to be able to recognize my inability to help them, not because I don't have the desire to, but I may be lacking somewhere in my skill set to do so. So exploring your skill set is very important. How about your communication style or your learning style? These are things that are very important for you to be self-aware. If you're at your job and your boss sits you down and say, hey, this is a new program that you need to learn. Here's the training modules. Sit here and listen to it and let me know when you're done. And you may say, okay, well, this is really boring and not really my learning style. Isn't that something that you may want to explore, perhaps with your supervisor, to say, you know what, this may not be the best way for me to learn this new software, right? So being able to, once again, know these things so we can get what it is that we need, so we can do what? Minimize, reduce our stress. Lastly, I will say, learning, being self-aware of what your pet peeves are and what your preferences are. Sometimes we're afraid to maybe be honest with someone about what is bothersome. I'll admit, just for fun, one of my pet peeves is just random noises. I have an 8-year-old who she can sit and she'll take a pen or pencil and she's just a tapping, or she's kicking a chair. Particularly in a car, she'll take her foot and kick my chair, and I'm like, oh my gosh, stress to the umpteenth power, right? Recognizing what those pet peeves are. That's so important. Guess what? You need to understand what your pet peeves are when you're in a relationship, particularly when you're in a caregiving relationship. Caregivers have to sometimes push some of those things down when they're trying to care for someone. And I don't know what situation you may have in your caregiving, but for the patients that we serve here at PACE, some of our patients have some cognitive conditions, i.e. dementia. And so they may be doing something that is a pet peeve for their caregiver, but they don't necessarily have the cognitive ability not to do those things. And so that would be a discussion that a caregiver needs to have with their support system, right? And with their medical team. Could be something that can be helped, could be not. So again, just want to encourage you that this exploration is imperative and you need to do it often. Here's an example, and I think I kind of gave an example earlier about Bob at work, okay? And what I like about this is, I'm not going to necessarily read this in its entirety, but he recognized, right, that there was a discrepancy between his standards and his performance. So what his standards and his values were, he realized that wasn't being translated into his work. So what did Bob decide to do? And if you notice, it says he engaged in self-evaluation to determine where it comes from and how to improve. And I don't care if you are 9 or 99, there's always room to improve, right? So he decided that I'm going to take a course to improve my writing ability. I'm going to have a colleague review the report before I submit it, right? And then I'm going to create a reusable template for future reports. Can you imagine how much his stress is reduced just by him taking some time to do a self-evaluation of what was causing him not to perform the way that he felt like he should be able to perform? And this is, again, based off of a work example, but in a caregiving example, if, for example, you know what, I am just not a morning person, and mom wakes up, she's up at 6:30 in the morning. And when I wake up, I am not at my best as far as caregiving is concerned. I'm a little bit irritated. I may be a little bit quick-tempered. So what could you do in that case? Well, I will tell you, if you have PACE, in that instance, we provide home care aides that they could come in the mornings and assist our caregivers with getting their loved one dressed in the mornings, sometimes possibly preparing a very light breakfast for them and getting them on the van and into the day center when our day centers are open for the day, so that that caregiver can get the much needed self-care time in the morning that they need. Because guess what? It's not their preference. And they're not performing well as a caregiver during that time. again, but just being able to, we tell our families, let us know what you need. All of our services are based off of need, but you got to be willing to explore that and tell us what those needs are. Okay. So 5 ways to cultivate self-awareness. I'm just going to touch on a few of these. My favorite one, it's up at the top, which means something. Connect with yourself daily. Daily. One of the things that I try to do, and I'll admit, consistency is everything, and sometimes that can be difficult when we have demands of being a caregiver. But you have to find that time to connect with yourself, and really check in so that you can have that moment of, you know what, today I need for this to work out better. So that's very important. Avoiding digital distractions. Social media is great, but sometimes I do feel that our world of technology, there's the good part, and then there's also the bad part. Sometimes the digital world kind of consumes us, and we get sucked in so much to what's going on digitally that we forget the importance of what's going on, that we can see and touch and feel, things that are tangible, that are right in front of us. So be mindful of that. I'm going to skip down a little bit. Pay attention to your inner state as it rises. So meaning paying attention to when those emotions start to rise. I know for me, the temperature changes. I might get hot. Maybe my hands become sweaty. My palms are sweaty. And I may start wringing my hands a little bit to know that, okay, something's happening with me. My stress level may be rising because I've noticed some of the things that I am physically experiencing at the moment. Skipping down just a little bit more, journaling. Guys, I cannot tell you how powerful journaling is. Not saying you have to do it, just something that you can use to kind of cultivate that. But it just kind of helps you write down what you are experiencing. That part is therapeutic within itself, right? You're getting it out, you're purging it, getting it on paper. But you actually get to go back and reflect on it. You actually get to go back and read it. And the cool part is 9 times out of 10, you read it when you're in a different space. Okay. So if you journal on a day that was just not a good day for you for whatever reason, and you go back, on a day where you've had a really good day and you're like, let me go back and kind of reflect what went wrong that day. Oh my goodness. It is the most powerful process that you can do. And when I say journal, no, you don't have to write 30 pages. It can be a paragraph about how you're feeling, about what you feel like needs to change. And so that's very, very, very important. Practice listening. It's very, 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 very important, particularly when we're dealing with stress, that we are communicating. So we're giving the information to someone else, but we also want to listen to others, because sometimes we can kind of get caught up with our emotions and kind of can be stuck in our head, and we don't always hear what is really happening. So that listening is very important, and asking for feedback. There has to be at least one person, but hopefully you have more than one, that you really can trust, that when you need a different perspective, that when you need feedback on, hey, listen, I am really struggling with this. What do you notice about me? And I can tell you one that my family tells me all the time is that I won't say no. I say yes to everything. And then I get overwhelmed because I want to help everybody. And yes, does it hurt sometimes to kind of get that feedback? Yes, but it definitely keeps the perspective that I need so that I can try to improve and get better. Okay. So self-awareness is important, being aware of who you are. Now, what about self-reflection? And how important is self-reflection? Self-reflection, if you can picture yourself in the bathroom looking in the mirror, and and saying that now that I'm aware of who I am, right? I've done the self-awareness. I've done my personality type. I know what my skill set is. I know what the communication style is. I know what my pet peeves and my preferences are. Now we have to hold ourselves accountable, right? And so perhaps in a situation where you maybe had an interaction, say with a medical provider. And forgive me, I am assuming that everyone here is a caregiver since we are with Lisa's Care Connection. So I'm using that as an example, hopefully that I'm kind of relating to everyone here. But say you have an interaction with a medical provider. Maybe there was a disagreement about a medication being stopped, maybe a medication being started. And perhaps the interaction didn't go well. You may have left the conversation very frustrated. Nothing really got accomplished. And so being able to have that moment of reflection, right? And really evaluating based off of who I am, the awareness of the type of person I am. Now let me reflect and see how does that now translate into how I interact, communicate, behave out in the world. Okay? So that's very, very, very important. Again, y'all, I told you guys I love quotes. The journey into self-love and self-acceptance must begin with self-examination. Until you take the journey of self-reflection, it is almost impossible to grow or learn in life. And again, I know this is all about stress. The whole theme of this is stress. But I hope you guys see the connection. I'm trying to connect the dots of how we can minimize stress. Yes, the outside forces are what they are. But guys, if we start with us, if you start with yourself, right? One of my favorite quotes, and I didn't include it in my presentation because I don't need to, I knew I would say it anyway, is by Gandhi, who says, "Be the change that you wish to see." And in being that change, you have to become. And in order to become, right, there's a whole lot of self-exploration that has to happen. And I promise you, if you take the time and you take the opportunity, and like I said, whether it's with someone that you trust, that you're very close to, a medical professional, when I say a medical professional, a mental health professional, to kind of help you with this process, you would be amazed. You would be amazed at how you are able to gain the skills that you need to minimize the stress that we experience in life. Okay. So within self-reflection, I don't know if you guys ever heard of the term emotional intelligence. And I don't think that there's any way for me to see people raise their hands. I don't know if Kina, you can see that or not. But I was introduced to emotional intelligence just last year, towards the end of last year. I had just never heard of the term. I get the concept, but I just had never heard of the term emotional intelligence. And as you can see here, it's the ability to understand, use, and manage your own emotions in positive ways to do what? Relieve stress, communicate effectively, empathize with others, and overcome challenges, and diffuse conflict. So does it sound like emotional intelligence is like the antidote to stress? I think so. We have got to make sure, guys, that we are willing to have these moments for ourselves. And I know as a caregiver, and let me just mention, I didn't mention earlier, PACE is not only near and dear to my heart because I work here and I love the work that we do, but I am also a caregiver for my father-in-law, and he is a part of the PACE program. And when I tell you there have been moments in being a caregiver that I have had to check my emotional intelligence. Oh my goodness, lots of stories I can give you, but I just don't have the time. But I really did have to understand the emotions that I was feeling, right? And why I was feeling those emotions. So that did not um, negatively affect my relationship as a caregiver with my father-in-law. And just to let you know, it is going well. We are doing well, but it's a daily thing, right? Because as his disease of dementia progresses, he changes, right? And so his ability to do certain things, he might was able to do it one day, the next day he's not able to do it. And I say the next day, sometimes there may be changes within weeks, there may be changes within months. It feels like it's days apart though. That's how stressful it can be. But exploring emotional intelligence, if you are computer savvy, there is so much information about emotional intelligence. Again, I didn't dive too deep because I know I didn't have a whole lot of time. But that is so, 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 so important to relieve the stress. It's even in the definition, so that proves how important it is. All right, so finally, the framework of stress. Again, I did not want to do a whole lot of talk about stress. I hope everyone knows by now that yes, you have to be mindful of where your sources of stress come from, your triggers, right? Because stress can be very unhealthy for us. And not just because stress makes us behave a certain way, meaning we experience those behaviors when we're angry, when we're frustrated, we might cry, those type of things. But stress actually affects us internally as well, right? It affects your heart, it affects your lungs. So it is very, very, very important, right, that we do have this framework. I just didn't want to make a big presentation just about this because I think most people are aware of this. But I can tell you, I learned something. Had no idea that in 1936 was when this term stress was coined. Didn't know that. And I also found out that there's an American Institute of Stress. Again, the American Institute of Stress is really a website. I will say on that website, they have stress assessments and things that you can do, but there's actually a cost for that. Please don't. My opinion is don't pay for that. Talk to a mental health professional. That usually stress assessments, personality tests, a lot of times are a part of the assessment when you're meeting with a counselor. So don't necessarily pay for those things unless you just want to, but it's not necessary. Two types of stress, right? There's acute stress and there's chronic stress. Acute stress being, okay, the acute stress of me disconnecting from the Zoom meeting. That was acute stress. I mean, oh my gosh, the panic in my heart when I was like, oh my God, where did they go? I am not in my presentation. What happened to Zoom? That was acute stress in that moment. And I will admit that my heart is still racing a little bit from that. All right. And then there's chronic stress that doesn't necessarily go away. And I can say, once again, going back to our roles as caregivers, guess what? Sometimes that can bring about chronic stress. My husband and I have been caregivers now for, let's see, my daughter is 8. So we have been caregivers for about 6 years for my father-in-law. And yes, I will tell you, I have experienced some chronic stress, just trying to make sure that we are paying attention to his decline, his needs, making sure that we're staying on top of the medication if we need to adjust them. I mean, it's a lot. Okay. If you're not dealing with caregiving, maybe you're dealing with a chronic illness, such as diabetes, high blood pressure. And when you have those chronic illnesses, meaning there's no cure for that, that's something that you have to manage day to day through diet or through exercise, that can bring about some chronic stress because you're constantly worried about how to maintain your health. Now, I'm going to kind of read off of this definition because I thought it was very powerful the way that it was written. Stress being a condition or feeling experienced when a person perceives that demands exceed the personal and social resources the individual is able to mobilize. Okay, let's take a deep breath. I'm going to read that again. A condition or feeling experienced when a person perceives, okay, sorry, I'm gonna start over. A condition or feeling experienced when a person perceives that demands exceed the personal and social resources the individual is able to mobilize. So let's pause and let's think about that definition. When a person perceives that demands exceed the personal and social resources. So, what do you think? Why do you think I talked about self awareness and self reflection at the beginning? Right? Because if we learn those things about what our own personal resources are based off of, once again, preferences, personality, communication style, if we can kind of get ahead of knowing what we can handle, right? What our abilities are, maybe that can minimize some of the stress that we experience. And we have to make sure that we don't ignore those things that we know, right? Don't ignore that maybe there are limitations. Acknowledge it so that we can be like Bob, right? And pursue information, resources that will help us be better in an area that we might be limited in. Let's see. I think we're going to go here to our next slide. So, what is self-inflicted stress? What is the good, the bad, and the ugly of what we create on our very own? Self-inflicted stress, meaning, guess what? It's not the COVID-19, right? And don't get me wrong, COVID-19 has certainly made things stressful. But isn't there some accountability and some responsibility, even in the outside, right, commands of what's happening around us? Isn't there some accountability for how we handle and how we manage ourselves in the midst of this pandemic? And I will tell you, as a caregiver, as a wife, as a mom, who has a school-age child. My daughter, she is 8. She will be 9 next month. Everything kind of stopped all at once. I felt like, we blinked and school was done. We don't even know if school's going to open back up. And I know for some of our families that we serve here at PACE, our day centers closed down. And while we can accept, right, that this was for the safety of everybody involved, it was stressful. We had no control over what was happening. Literally, it was like a domino effect. And so I think for a while there, and again, I'm using myself as an example, but I want you guys to kind of think about it within your own experience of not being able to go and thrift shop. I'm a thrifter. I love Goodwill. I will go to any thrift shop that exists. And yes, the thought of not being able to go thrifting was a bit traumatic for me. Um, and so we got to kind of say, you know what, based off of this outside thing, what am I experiencing? All right. And I'm not saying find out what you're experiencing so you can make it go away. Allow yourself to say, you know what, this is what I'm experiencing because this is something that I look forward to. I look forward to spending time with my family. I look forward to being able to travel, right? And so because I look forward to being able to do this and this outside force has caused this, now what? Now what? Do I try to control the situation? Well, you can try it, but are you going to self-inflict yourself with stress that you really don't have to have? Because at the end of the day, we could not control any of this. We could not control any of this from happening. What are our expectations? Are they reasonable, right? Are they realistic? It may not be realistic for me to think that surely school is going to open up and everything is going to be back to normal as soon as August hits. I should be able to go to work and not have to worry about childcare once August hits. That's a bit unrealistic for me to expect that at this point. because there's this outside force, right, that's happening that I have no control over. So I've got to make sure I'm not self-inflicting stress when I just want to have these unrealistic expectations and I'm ignoring what's happening on the outside. One of the things that we talked about here at work, pessimism, kind of having this negative outlook. Oh, this is never going to go away. Oh my goodness. This is going to be so frustrating. Nobody's going to like coming to work because none of our patients are here. Our families are not going to be able to get the service that they need. They're going to be mad at us. They're not going to want to be a part of our program anymore. Self-inflicted stress. And I can say, I loved PACE before this whole pandemic thing. But I love my PACE family even more because we have been able, and I say PACE, Prisma Health, okay? Let me just include everybody, Prisma Health, because it really and truly is a big team. It's a big family. From our CEO, president, all the way down, we have been committed to making sure that our patients and our families still get the quality care that we wanted to give them before COVID-19, they were going to get it after COVID-19. And although it was uncomfortable and we struggled with trying to come up with the most effective and the safest way to serve our patients and our families, it took us coming together as a team to say, this is what our patients and our families deserve and this is what they need. And we couldn't do that being pessimistic about the situation, right? We couldn't do that if we felt like that, oh, well, the only way we can do it is we stay in control. We had to be flexible. We had to come out of our rigid thinking, okay? The other two words here that I wanted to address are shame and guilt. And I wanted to address those things because as caregivers, I feel that sometimes we allow shame and guilt to overtake us. And I'll give you a good example. Sometimes we have families that we offer respite. Our families get 5 days out of the year free of charge that they can use for their family members to go to respite. So we contract with a few of the facilities here in the community so that our patient can go have some time away from their family. The family can go, whether it's vacation or staycation or just some self-care time. And believe it or not, I have families that are guilty for taking that time. And I am constantly reminding them that that is nothing to be guilty about. You should not be ashamed of the fact that you need a break. And of course, they process it as I'm saying I need a break from my loved one. And that's nothing to be ashamed of. That's nothing to be guilty of. Again, self-inflicted stress, right? And so we have to be mindful of when we are kind of putting ourselves in a position that we're not allowing ourselves to be human, right? And feel the things that we need to feel. That's very, very important. I'm not sure if this was, it will work. Brene Brown considers herself to be a social scientist. If I'm not mistaken, she does have a degree in social work. She is phenomenal. And hopefully I have time to do this quick little snippet. Again, Kina, if I am going way, way over, I don't think we got started right at 12:30. So if it's okay, I'm going to keep moving unless I hear from you otherwise. But her book, Daring Greatly, deals with shame and guilt, right? And how shame and guilt can be things in our life that literally stifle us. And so this is just a little bit, a snippet of her talk. You can Google TED Talks of Brene Brown. I highly recommend it. She is a phenomenal speaker, phenomenal presenter, but she does have books that you can also purchase. So just Google Brene Brown. And if, again, you don't have the resources to be able to Google, I can certainly provide some information on her and her book series because it's just phenomenal. But I'm going to click on this video. Hopefully it will come up.
The thing to understand about shame is it's not guilt. Shame is a focus on self. Guilt is a focus on behavior. Shame is I am bad. Guilt is I did something bad. How many of you, if you did something that was hurtful to me, would be willing to say, I'm sorry, I made a mistake? How many of you would be willing to say that? Guilt, I'm sorry, I made a mistake. Shame, I'm sorry, I am a mistake. There is a huge difference between shame and guilt. And here's what you need to know. Shame is highly, highly correlated with addiction, depression, violence, aggression. The ability to hold something we've done or failed to do up against who we want to be is incredibly adaptive. It's uncomfortable, but it's adaptive. If you put shame in a petri dish, it needs three things to grow exponentially: secrecy, silence, and judgment. If you put the same amount of shame in a petri dish and douse it with empathy, it can't survive. The two most powerful words when we're in struggle: me too. And so I'll leave you with this thought. If we're going to find our way back to each other, vulnerability is going to be that path. And I know it's seductive to stand outside the arena because I think I did it my whole life and think to myself, I'm going to go in there and kick some ass when I'm bulletproof and when I'm perfect. And that is seductive. But the truth is, that never happens. And even if you got as perfect as you could and as bulletproof as you could possibly muster, when you got in there, that's not what we want to see. We want you to go in. We want to be with you and across from you. And we just want for ourselves and for the people we care about and the people we work with to dare greatly. So thank y'all very much. I really appreciate it.
Okay. So let's see. I'm going to cancel that. And let's see. I'll go back to my presentation here. Hopefully that won't. Okay. Phew, guys. All right. I did it. Okay. Hopefully everybody is back. Okay. So I wish I could hear you guys, and maybe once I get to the end, which we are towards the end, kind of how that resonated with you. Shame, I am bad. Guilt, I did something bad. And again, I just want you to see the connection with shame and guilt and how that connects to stress, right? To think all of the time that you are bad, that is stressful. That is self-inflicted stress. We are all fearfully and wonderfully made. There is nothing bad about our being. Yes, our behaviors can be bad, our attitudes can be bad, but as a human, as a person, no, we are not bad. Yes, you can do something bad. The guilt, yes, you can do something bad. And that is stressful when you kind of wrestle with yourself. Wow, I could have handled that differently, right? And it's stressful to think about it. But we can, if we're striving for better, if we're trying to improve, I think that we can grow when we embrace, right, the stress of having to take the time to do the self-awareness and the self-reflection that we need so that we don't make that same mistake again, right? We can be better for ourselves and for the people that love us and that we care for. So tools you can use. Self-love, start there. I cannot say it any other way. You gotta love yourself. You gotta give yourself a break sometimes. You gotta be willing to give yourself some self-care, and you can't feel guilty about it. And that may include sometimes you saying no. Perhaps you have been approached, maybe you were a caregiver at one point and you were asked to be a caregiver another time. And you were like, you know what, or guess what, I'm a caregiver now. I don't think I ever want to do this again. I don't want to be in the role or the position of a caregiver again if I can help it. If that is what you identify with, if that is what you are aware of, I pray you have the courage to be able to stand in that, because that is perfectly okay. There's a concept called self-fullness. And I didn't get to show that video, but what I will say is it's not about being selfish, but it's about being self-full. And what that just means is, because you have devoted the time, right, and the effort to take care of yourself, you are full enough that you can give to others. You cannot give to others if you yourself are not full. So that's what the self-fullness is, not selfishness, but self-fullness, making sure that you are filled, right, with the rest, the relaxation that you need in order to be able to do whatever it is that you do. Caregiving, you go to work, helping others. You yourself have to be full in order to be able to do those things for other people. Reevaluate your circle. When you are in a constant cycle, right? I always say, I love that definition of insanity, doing the same thing and expecting different results. Take a look at the people around you, all right? And really evaluate how maybe they may perpetuate that whole idea of that slide of pessimism and trying to be in control. Are you connected to people who are doing and thinking the same way? All right. And not that you can't be friends with them, or you have to, excommunicate yourself from family members, but you need to evaluate your circle and find out who you have around you and how they deal with stress. Because believe it or not, that can be linear. It can be contagious, if you will. So be mindful of who's in your circle. Network and connect. Network and connect with people who may have the resources that you need. Network and connect with other people. After you evaluate your circle, if you say, hey, listen, I need to have another caregiver in my circle that knows and understands what I'm going through. All right. I need to network and connect with that social worker at Pace, because guess what? She may have some resources for me. Network and connect with other people. Expose yourself to experiences, right, that will give you new experiences, new ideas, new thoughts. Okay, it's very important. Ask for help, accept help. Okay, so ask for it when you need it, but there are times where I think we are offered help and we don't accept the help. Once again, self-inflicted stress. When we won't even accept it, when we didn't have to do anything but say, yes, I will accept your help. So caregivers, be willing to accept the help. And even if nobody offers it, please ask for it. Another tool, mental health counseling. If you are noticing that you're consumed with stress all the time in every situation, mental health counseling, guys, it is, I promise you, it's wonderful. It's like having a best friend who guides you through the process. And I'm kind of hesitating with how I'm presenting it, but I tell people your therapist, your counselor, as a clinician, I make sure it's a good fit, right? I make sure my skill set, because I'm self-aware, I make sure that my skill set is such that, and I apologize, my skill set is such that I can help you, right? And I make sure that it's a good fit. So get in line with a mental health professional that can help you manage that. The other thing that I think I said earlier about being able to say no, this is another tool that you can use. It's okay to say no, but know that it is okay to say yes to yourself. And so we focus on, oh gosh, I'm going to have to tell this person no. Oh gosh, I'm not going to be able to do X, Y, and Z for so-and-so. That's what we focus on, and that creates stress for us. When in actuality, we really need to say, but I'm able to say yes for myself. Yes to myself. That, you know what? Yes, I deserve this break. And yes, I deserve to be honest about what I can and can't handle, because I need to manage the stress that I'm experiencing. So, in other words, take care of yourself. It's very important that, particularly as caregivers, right? If we're going to be self-full, we need to fill ourselves up so that we can care for others. We got to minimize the stress. All right. Can't promise that our lives will never have stress in it. Nope, that is not what I'm saying at all. But we can be self-aware. We can self-reflect. We can love ourselves, fill ourselves up so that we can minimize stress and then be even better people. Okay. I really hope that this was helpful. I really, really hope that this was helpful. And I hope we have enough time for questions. But again, I want to thank Kina and Lisa's Care Connection for this opportunity. And I hope to be back to speak to you guys again soon one